Good evening. I'm Paul Rowland. I'm the Executive Director of AASHE, as many of you know, the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. I have to tell you, I am thrilled, totally thrilled to see more than, probably close to 2,000 of my closest friends and colleagues here tonight. I mean, it's better than Facebook and LinkedIn and MySpace all thrown together. This is real. So I'm just very thrilled to have you here, and it is an honor for me to be able to open AASHE 2010, Creating Sustainable Communities and Campuses. We may very well be the largest higher education sustainability advocates meeting in the world. And I'm pleased that each of you is here. I particularly want to welcome our participants from abroad who've traveled far to be part of this part of the conversations that we'll be having here the next few days. And if you look, I don't know, I can't see it from here, but if you look to the wall to my left, you'll see the flags representing the countries of all of our international participants. Some of you got an early start on the conference by attending the workshops and the student summit today. Could I ask all of the students who are here today to stand, please? Thank you all for being part of this event. We're proud to have you here, and we're proud to see you as you will be part of our future. Some of you also captured the essence of our theme, Creating Sustainable Campuses and Communities, through our community service projects today. If you participated in the service projects today, would you please stand so that we can recognize your service to the community? We want to thank our partners who provided the opportunities. Black and Gold City Goes Green, Pittsburgh Students Environmental Coalition, Tepper Net Impact, Allegheny Clean Waste, Friends of the Riverfront, and Pittsburgh Cares for their assistance in putting this together for us. Thank you all for your service. That is what this is a lot about. I know that for many of you, coming here meant difficult choices. It meant sometimes establishing priorities and sorting out what was important to you. And sometimes it meant some sacrifice. In some cases, you came here on your own dime and your own time. And this represents an important choice on how you use your resources. For others, your institute may have paid your way and made choices that recognize the importance of what you will learn in the next few days. As we are all well aware, there are many ways that you could have chosen to use your resources, and we are very glad that you've chosen to invest in your sustainability professional development here at AASHE 2011. Despite the cost of attending the conference, we are still a reasonably cheap date when it comes to national conferences. We are able to keep our costs down because of the support we receive from our generous major sponsors. At this time, I'd like to recognize our silver sponsors: Aramark, United States Environmental Protection Agency, Siemens, Train, and Waste Management. In addition, our bronze sponsors are CA Technologies, Domtar, Izzy Plus, Office Depot, and SCA. I also want to recognize GLAD for their support in providing the composting stations throughout the conference center and for their One Bag campaign to reduce waste in athletic events. Because of the support of our sponsors, we are able to reduce the cost of the AASHE conference and make it a more sustainable event. Please join me in thanking these supporters of higher education sustainability. My joy in seeing all of you here tonight is tempered by the recognition that in the past few months we've lost two great leaders of sustainability. 2 months ago, we learned of the passing of Ray Anderson, the founder and chairman of Interface. Ray had served as a keynote presenter at the AASHE 2006 conference and again at the joint AASHE Ball State University Greening of the Campus conference in 2009. For nearly 2 decades, Ray has been a leading spokesperson for the business case for sustainability. He's been a pioneer, a visionary, and yes, in the best sense of the word, a gentleman. Ray came to sustainability not just in terms of the economics of sustainability practices, and not just in the environmentalism of sustainability. Ray understood sustainability as the key to a better future for the people he knew, his family, his friends, and his employees. And it was personal. Ray was described as a radical industrialist, fitting term for the man who said, "For theft of our children's future to be a crime, there must be a clear, demonstrable alternative to the take-make-waste industrial system that so dominates our civilization and is the major culprit, stealing our children's future by digging up the earth and converting its products that quickly become waste in a landfill or an incinerator. In short, digging up the earth and converting it to pollution." Ray provided that alternative for us. When I had dinner with him at the Greening of the Conference, Greening of the Campus meetings 2 years ago, he said the one question he wished he'd been able to answer publicly was one that had been asked of him: why do we need carpet? And his answer was, "I make carpet so that it'll make people happy and enjoy a better life." We will miss Ray Anderson. Two weeks ago, we lost another world sustainability leader, Wangari Maathai. Dr. Maathai had inspired millions of people to think about sustainable development as the key to releasing human potential. It is impossible to capture all that she meant, not just to Kenya and Africa, but to all of us. She worked for decades on eradicating poverty, improving the environment, championing women's rights, exposing climate injustice, and fighting government corruption. She has brilliantly woven together the many strands of sustainability so that we can see and understand the ways that these elements are all necessary for a better future. In her latest book, Replenishing the Earth: Spiritual Values for Healing Ourselves and the World, after discussing the need to engage and be thoughtful and active, she wrote, "The truth is, sometimes our minds need a rest. Even rivers, which can flow with torrential force, reach a wetland area where the waters slow down and move in circles. As they swirl around, the waters also follow channels that lead to underground reservoirs and fill them. It may seem that the river is simply meandering and stagnating, but wetlands can be very fertile areas that provide a lot of life and clean water. So it is with moments of reflection. Give yourself time to think and find your direction once again. Allow your own reserves of energy to be replenished through time in the natural world. You don't have to have a particular place of solace in nature. Perhaps you feel the need to disappear into a forest or a cave, but a park or just sitting on a riverbank can serve too. In fact, anything can capture our attention. A bird, a fruit on a tree, a flower, watching a river flow, just being quiet. It's refreshing to know that life is everywhere. Tonight, we join world leaders and Dr. Maathai's sisters and brothers around the world who celebrate her life of serving and giving back. Let us pause for a moment of silence to remember those who have left us with a richer understanding of who we are and what we must do. We would like to invite you to spend some time in the renewal room. Space that was provided for you to reflect on the many things around us here at the conference and how we got here and who has helped us to get here. The room's located in room number 312 in the convention center here, and it is sponsored by Greener U. I hope you'll spend a little bit of your time here stopping by that room, finding that silence and finding that space to make sense of all of the things that are going on here. As I consider some of the lessons learned from these great leaders of sustainability, I'm drawn to two words: thoughtfulness and joy. Last year, as I opened the conference in Denver, I talked about the need to find the joy in our sustainability work. Be it the joy of celebrating small and large victories, or the joy of contemplation, the happiness that we find kneeling in our gardens and appreciating the beauty and the abundance we have. Tonight, I want to welcome you to a few days of thoughtfulness, a concept that I believe is fundamental to higher education. As an educator, I've spent the last few decades thinking a lot about what the purpose of education is. And it's become quite clear to me that if there's one thing that we all should be taking home from our education, it's to be more thoughtful. It's a fundamental idea of why we obtain a higher education, and that is to create a deeper understanding. Through education, we are expected to develop the knowledge and the skills to understand ourselves, our society, and our world. As agents of higher education, we have a responsibility to be thoughtful people. But although thoughtfulness is a necessary condition, it's not sufficient. Thoughtful hermits are likely to be good people, and they probably have a very small carbon footprint. But they're insufficient when it comes to creating a better world of opportunity for all. No, thoughtfulness needs to be coupled with action. Whether the action is an academic paper, community organizing, volunteering to go into the community to do work, or doing work on your campus, it may be less relevant what the action is than the fact that the thoughtfulness has led to action. I can't talk about taking action without acknowledging the young people around the world who have been taking action in the last year. Action in North Africa, in the Middle East, the Arab Spring. Action in the United States that started as Occupy Wall Street and has been spreading throughout the country. These are actions that get our attention to address problems. Actions that ask us to propose thoughtful solutions to complex problems, complex, sustainable solutions. Let's not forget the interplay between actions and thoughtfulness. My hope for all of you who have come here tonight, you who have made your sustainability professional development a priority, who have asked your institution to invest in you, my hope is that you will spend your time in thoughtful conversations, conversations that will lead you home to actions that are better because of what you have learned here at AASHE 2011, Creating Sustainable Campuses and Communities. I am thrilled to be here with you tonight. Let's begin. It's now my pleasure to ask Sheraton to come forward to introduce our keynote speaker. Sherry is the Vice President of Finance and Operations at Pacific Lutheran University. She is our conference co-chair. She is an AASHE board member and the past chair of the AASHE board and a founding chair of the AASHE board of directors. I can quite honestly say that without Sherry, I don't know as though we'd be here today. I don't know as though we'd have an AASHE. Sherry's been a great friend and a mentor to me. Please welcome Sheraton.
Well, thank you, Paul, for your thoughtful words this evening as we gather at our opening event for the AASHE 2011 conference. Isn't Pittsburgh great? I'm so excited to be here with AASHE because I've never been to Pittsburgh before, and I've already just had a fantastic time in the 48 hours I've been here. I'd like to add my welcome to all of you, to those of you who are new to AASHE 2011, and to all of us returners. Many of us have already had a great day at workshops, at the Student Sustainability Summit, and a number of other activities. Several of us went out and painted storefronts in Lawrenceville with Pittsburgh Cares, just a fantastic organization. We learned about the Pittsburgh vibrant arts community and everything that's going on to improve this wonderful city. What fun. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our opening keynote speaker this evening. Please join AASHE in welcoming Majora Carter in the opening keynote session for AASHE 2011, Creating Sustainable Campuses and Communities. Now, Majora was once a student as well and earned her Bachelor of Arts degree in Acting and Film at Wesleyan University and a Master of Fine Arts from NYU in New York City. Sounds like we have some NYU alums here or current students. Great. A known advocate for advocating for sustainability in inner city locations, Ms. Carter founded and led Sustainable South Bronx from 2001 to 2008, when few were talking about sustainability in places like the Bronx. By 2008, Majora coined the term green the ghetto, as she pioneered the nation's first urban green-collar jobs training and placement system and spearheaded legislation that fueled demand for these jobs. She currently hosts the Peabody Award-winning public radio series, The Promised Land, and has a long list of awards and honorary degrees, including a MacArthur Genius Fellowship. Since 2008, her consulting firm, MCG, has inspired climate adaptation, urban microeconomic business and leadership development strategies for business, government, foundations, universities, and economically underperforming communities. Please join me in giving an AASHE welcome to Majora Carter.
Welcome. How is everybody? Oh, I'm glad somebody showed up. Good. Actually, one question from the tech people. Is there a light here? If not, that's okay. There was a light here before. But in the meantime, first of all, thank you. It is such an honor to be addressing you, and deeply humbling at this point, because I know I'm actually here as a stand-in for the late Wangari Maathai, who is supposed to be addressing you here today. And I'm not a particularly religious person, but I am very much a spiritual one. And I believe that as people move from this life that they're in right now, the bodies that we occupy right now, they actually do become our ancestors. And they're there to watch over us and to guide us if we listen hard enough. And I think both Ray and Wangari really did light a way for all of us to really help us move in a direction that we know is good for ourselves, for our children, for the planet, and also just allows us to just be better to each other, quite frankly. And I'm really deeply honored to be here talking with you at all about all this, because I think ultimately what their work was about, quite honestly, is peace. How do you create, a world, a community, starting at the community level, that allows people to be their absolute best selves, so that we will think about making things better, for the next generation, keeping things not, so terrible for the ones that we're in right now. And that, I hope, is what this talk will mean to you, as I go forward. Just to let you know, I'm from a community called the South Bronx in New York City, and it is now known as sort of an environmental and economic train wreck in a lot of ways. It was a former, walk-to-work community. Lots of manufacturing used to go on there. Actually, my neighborhood, I'm happy to say this finally in Pittsburgh, but my neighborhood, because we did so much steel back in the 40s and before that, we were actually known as Little Pittsburgh. So I was very excited about that. And that, of course, we've got lots of years of financial disinvestment between then and now, basically set us up for lots of environmental abuses, to come into our community. So these formerly manufacturing centers suddenly became the places where there was lots of things like waste facilities management coming in. Then later on, power plants, and then later on, one of the world's largest food distribution centers, which brought 60,000 diesel truck trips to our community. So we saw the consequences of all this, but it's also really interesting to be in a place like this, because the community that I'm from and communities like it all over the country have lots of people that won't graduate from high school, let alone go to the institutions that all of you here represent or go to. And that is just the reality of it. But those same people are huge wellsprings of knowledge and expertise if given an opportunity to show that. And so in our community, we really did experience, because we knew the waste facilities and the power plants and all those things were having a very serious impact on not just the quality of our life, which was true, it was, but it also had a pretty intense impact on our public health. We have one of the country's highest childhood asthma hospitalization rates. We also have a diabetes and obesity epidemic as well. Parents are not willing to let their kids go outside and play, get the kind of physical activity that many of us once did when we were little, just running around in our communities, because many of them know that the air is polluted, and many of these kids have asthma, and also are also thinking that these kids are going to be hit by a truck. So these are kind of things these land use patterns absolutely have an impact on how people live their lives and the quality of our public health and quality of life. But one of the worst things that we found out was the fact that Columbia University did this study back in 2006, I believe, where they conclusively linked fossil fuel emissions, or proximity to fossil fuel emissions with learning disabilities in young children. So poor kids who do poorly in school go to jail in this country, statistically. And so we were sort of, where do you find those poor schools? And often right in communities where they have lots of environmental abuses happening. And so it seemed to us as though they were creating this pathway from poverty directly into prison. And that was a really kind of frightening thing. And it's actually, we incarcerate more people in America than any country, on the face of this planet. That's what we're leading in right now. So one of the things that we worked on, many of the things that we worked on, was really trying to think about, well, we know our community in a very, very big way. What do we need? What are we trying to do with our community? If the world kind of sees us, and our city and state sees us, as this place that is perfectly okay to dump upon, because we happen to be a poor community that's politically vulnerable, how do we see ourselves? And that took a lot. We first got involved around solid waste handling, because the city and state wanted to build a huge waste facility right on our waterfront. And we knew that it was adding insult to injury, and we couldn't really continue to have that kind of impact, anymore happening to us. So what did we do? One of the first things that I actually helped do was work to really think about how do you sort of flip the script on what a community that's traditionally been known, for one thing, which is, the repository for all the waste that mostly wealthier and whiter communities can avoid, or how do we change it so that we can actually show that there's something that we want to fight for? And so one of the things I did was actually work on developing, taking this particular dump that was been on the Bronx River waterfront for as long as I could remember. And actually, I'd never been to the waterfront in my own community because all I knew of it was that there were waste handling facilities and all sorts of auto wrecking places and things of that nature that were on our waterfront. But what I didn't know, after my dog literally dragged me through, through much of the dump that was there, and this is what it looked like after at least six cleanups, mind you. What I realized was that my community the street in particular, dead-ended at the Bronx River. Found out about a very small little seed grant that the National Fish and Wildlife Service was actually offering to do Bronx River restoration projects in our local community, and we were able to really see the impact of what this kind of thing was going to be like. I mean, to tell you the truth, when I first saw what the riverfront looked like in my community, it was about 6:30 in the morning, and I walked down there, or rather my dog dragged me into the lot. I would not have gone down there by myself with like all the weeds and tires and all that kind of stuff literally hanging over my head. What I did was I realized that this particular place, this dump, that if we could use this to transform literally what our community saw when it walked outside of its own doors. And so we worked really hard, whether it was local community cleanups or to really work to get elected officials to take notice of us or to talk to local businesses and some of the bigger businesses around. We were able to take that little tiny seed grant and basically transform it into over a $3 million grant that we got from the city back in 2006. And so this particular site, was just, no one could have thought or did think that we would have anything this beautiful, in the South Bronx community, in a place that was more well known for, drugs and crime and poor schools and stuff like that, that we would ever have this kind of land use that was there specifically for the community to enjoy and for others to come to our community to enjoy it with us. It really has become, this place where people come in and they do change when they walk into this space, because it is really green and it is really wonderful, and it provides the kind of nature and just that kind of feeling that you can only get when you're face to face with something like this. And I did like it so much that I got married there back in 2006. I just celebrated my 5th anniversary on Friday, so it's a pretty big deal for me. I kind of love it. And yes, my dog Zena, the one that dragged me there, was in fact my flower girl. And so it wasn't just a great place to get married, although it really, truly was, but that wasn't the sole intention for my wanting to do that. But what it did do was help people see that so much of what we thought, even about ourselves, that this was just a place that was ugly and dirty and nothing good could come there, we just dismissed that idea with this one little 2-acre park. But then we realized, what else could we do? And that was where it got really fun, because someone told me about this federal transportation grant to basically help reduce congestion and mitigate air quality. It was literally called CMAQ for those initials. And I was like, okay, that's great, but what do I do with this thing? And so I scratched my head and started thinking about, how do you do, what have other places around the world done, in order to really incorporate people in the local communities, really connect them in different ways, to different parks and whatever, to the natural resources in a place. And of course, greenways came up. And all a greenway is just a dedicated pedestrian and bicycle path, and often they connect, either to your waterfront, on-street, waterfront destinations, or they connect to larger greenways, and it also serves as a transportation system. So I wrote a proposal that garnered $1.25 million worth of federal transportation funds to design the South Bronx Greenway, which would then connect us, to the East Coast Greenway, which goes all the way from Maine all the way down to Miami. So that was a really cool kind of thing we were very excited about. And so we got that funding, and we worked to create this plan, which was just extraordinary. And it's stormwater management. Of course, it's pedestrian infrastructure as well, but it also allows people to be physically active, and it also provides local economic development opportunities too. And so, but this is the street that leads down into the park I showed you a little bit earlier, and this is what it's going to look like as we start spending, the money. And we got about $50 million, including $25 million for, that came from the economic stimulus package. And as far as I know, was the only community-initiated, non-vehicular, other than bicycles, transportation project that was funded through the stimulus package. So I'm pretty excited about that. And this is one of my favorite pictures because it's construction and people working, which is a really nice thing in this economy. But we also knew that when we first started doing this work, when we thought about our own community, it was all about you should have heard the kind of thing, the kind of stuff that I heard from so many people when I first started my organization in the South Bronx. People had no idea what to do with me in a lot of ways because they couldn't understand, what this green job thing was, and why would you link poverty alleviation and environmental remediation? It seemed like an utter no-brainer to me. And especially in a community like ours that was environmentally and economically challenged. And it seems like, we still haven't scratched the surface on that just yet, unfortunately. But we knew that if we were going to get people in our community to pay attention, we had to show them and give them both a personal as well as a financial stake in helping to improve the environment and working with us to help make that happen. So I started one of the country's very first green collar job training and placement systems, because the point was you don't just train people, you actually work to build infrastructure to make sure that they have jobs, go down the line, which doesn't always happen right now, unfortunately. But what we did was we looked at the fact that we were doing green infrastructure projects along our waterfront in particular, and we wanted to make sure that those jobs were going to be available to people in our local community. So we started training people in the skills of ecological restoration, starting with wetland restoration and then moving into urban forestry management, and then we actually got them OSHA trainings to learn how to clean up contaminated lands so you could use it for some kind of hopefully better reuse going down the line. And what was really important for us is that so many of the folks that we worked with had some pretty significant barriers to employment, whether they were generationally impoverished or folks that were in and out of our criminal justice system. They really, many of them had not even seen what it was like to have a family member, let alone themselves, with a job. So it wasn't just about teaching them the hard skills, which was incredibly important, but we also had to teach them the soft skills, things that that just come sort of naturally to the folks in this room. How to be a team player, how to, be a leader in your own life and really take initiative, and be, how to look busy when your boss is around. I mean, seriously, things like that you just know. And don't tell them, and I know your bosses might be in some of this room, but it's your secret safe with me. But that is the deal. And how do you do that in a way that actually inspires people to think that, they are not the statistic that they have always been told since day one that they were. And so to see, a single mom, on welfare who has actually never had a job because she started having kids when she was 14, really start to come into her own when she sees that she can contribute something after being told that she never ever would because all she was worth was just these little entitlements that she was going to get, grudgingly, but that she was contributing to something. That is the kind of power that type of program was able to provide to people, taking them off public welfare rolls, making them really productive citizens, and I'm so, so proud of that. Thank you. We also wanted to make a point of not helping people think that that this green was just all about like these like Birkenstock wearing tree huggers, and not that I have anything against Birkenstocks or hugging trees, I've done both. But that is sort of like the popular image of what green is in a lot of people's cases, not people in this room, but most of America. And so we really also wanted to show that it was about money as well, and that it was there to be made. And so we actually started our own businesses. One in particular was a green roof installation business, and a green roof is just simply, we borrowed this technology from Western Europe, and they plant a roof, mostly for stormwater management, because it literally absorbs between 75 to 90% of the stormwater that falls on it, so it doesn't actually go into our sewage treatment system, or and it also, because it provides a green layer, it actually cleans the air as well, and that also cuts down on pollution. And when you have it in mass, it literally, over a larger period, over a larger surface area in a city, it lowers your ambient air temperature, so reducing energy costs and energy usage as well. So these things are really important. So you're probably wondering why I'm showing, not a green roof in sight yet, but these are people working. These are jobs that cannot be outsourced. This is the type of green infrastructure that allows, that has to happen right here, really supporting people, local economies right where we are. But this is the roof that we built on top of my house back in 2005, and was just little seedlings and cuttings. So it was a real simple one. This is my upstairs neighbor who of course had to come and survey everything. But this is what it looked like a few years later. And this, I have to say, this particular green roof, it saved me from Hurricane Irene when it hit our community. I mean, there was a bit of flooding, in some of the row houses where I lived. We got none, and I'm sure it's because of my green roof, and the fact that we had a lot more, greenery in our little backyard. Of course, we dug up all the concrete in it, so I'm very grateful for stuff like this personally. But this is what we did on my headquarters roofs back in also, I think, 2006, just to show that there are different things you can do on a green roof. Everything from a little medicinal herb garden that we planted to urban agriculture to, and these were the best strawberries in the world. But they also actually help attract wildlife. It's back to our cities. This was a hawk that liked to hang out on our roof once the green roof was installed, and we affectionately named him Henry, and I like to call him Hank. But so all of these type of green infrastructure projects that I showed you, it's not like they will ever completely get rid of the need for things like municipal levels, water treatment facilities like this or like this. No, that's not true. But what they do is literally help you create opportunities for jobs, number one, and two, they actually reduce the operating costs of these places when you actually have it in mass. So this is all at taxpayer expense, and this is helping to reduce this kind of thing. And so this is actually a real Google map of my roof in the Bronx right now, and you can see it's the only one quite like it. But what we're hoping is that we're going to see a whole lot more things like this happening as well. And why? Because these are the type of things that can support both municipalities and their bottom lines in terms of the municipal services, stormwater management, air quality, and pollution control, and also provide real job opportunities for people too. So actually, I've got a little confession to make to you all. I actually do have something in common with the Tea Party. I do. And it's that I want a smaller government. But I want a smaller government by creating jobs for our most expensive citizens. And our most expensive citizens are the folks that are generationally impoverished, that are fighting in our oil wars, that are coming in and out, of jail. All of whom, and they tend to use, a disproportionate amount of our social service dollars, but don't necessarily get much better. When you look at the rates, whether it's self-medication through drug and alcohol abuse, or domestic violence, or the fact that their kids don't do as well in school. These are all the type of things that will come back to taxpayers, and also doesn't really provide the most dignified life for any of these folks. But this type of work, when people have it, actually also provides therapeutic benefits to support people, that are on that path, to help them really reduce stress. There have been tons of research, bodies of research out there around there that actually working with horticulture, literally with green, can provide the type of benefits that people really need to support therapeutically their own health and lifestyle. Everything from kids do better in school, when they're actually have access to seeing greenery, to families, are outside more often when there actually is more greenery in a place, thus reducing crime levels in a community. There are so many reasons why this particular type of work, this work in green infrastructure, is so important for us as a country right now. And it's not actually getting the kind of benefits the kind of attention that it really does need. It's sort of thought of as like this little flash in the pan, and isn't that sweet and cute? No, this stuff is not sweet and cute. This saves money, taxpayer dollars. And it saves lives in the process. So this is the kind of thing that I'm really interested in seeing happen more and more of. And the fact is, like, these kind of local solutions that actually provide opportunities for people, for local dollars to circulate within an economy, that allow for communities themselves to really, pick themselves up by their bootstraps and actually support and be real contributors to the economic vibrancy of of their own hometown, is what I actually call hometown security. It is when local people are trying to solve big problems with local solutions. And I actually have a few examples, of how folks are doing that nationally. Andy Lipkiss out in Los Angeles is a really interesting case, because they're looking at how, this particular number is pretty serious right now. And as we know, as the climate changes, we're going to be seeing a lot more of that second number. Do I think it's going to eclipse the first one? God, I hope not. But we are looking at it right now. But Andy found out about a really interesting thing in his hometown of Los Angeles, California. He runs an organization called Tree People, and it literally links trees and people and the work that they can do together in order to create, a better Los Angeles, and also nationally. He found out that the city of Los Angeles was actually planning on doing this $2 billion upgrade of the Los Angeles city schools, and that's great. What they found out was that nearly 10% of that budget was going to go to increased asphalt and air conditioning. And he realized that if they did, if they actually took out much of that asphalt, that they could actually reduce their energy costs, so to obviate the need for more air conditioners, create more green spaces, which actually provided better opportunities for kids to learn, and also provided jobs as well. So this is what green infrastructure looks like. Another example is further out, actually in Chicago. Brenda Palms Barber also was faced with a really interesting challenge. She was tasked with trying to figure out, how do you get just job skills to ex-offenders? And for her, this was really about making sure that really, when you think about it, the cost of doing this is about, to keep a person in jail for a year, it's more than a Harvard education. And 2/3 of the folks that go to jail in this country go right back in. And they're not getting any better, obviously. And again, all at huge taxpayer expense. But what she realized was that it was going to be tough for them to get folks the kind of job training that they wanted, even though many of them might have had lots of skills, they just couldn't put them on a resume. So what she did was come up with a really creative idea and created a social enterprise called Beeline, which was basically, she taught folks, or rather got people to teach them. She's not a beekeeper herself, but got them training in how to care for bees, and then turn it into a value-added product called a skincare product, and then they had to learn how to market it, merchandise it, manufacture it, actually sell it. So they learned all sorts of different types of skills to make this stuff stuff happen. And then it was later sold at Whole Foods, and they've got a really thriving mail order business as well. And so they learned all of these type of things going on there, but this was how they were able to create the kind of job training program that allowed folks to build up a resume that really made a lot of sense. And just so that we know, Brenda's recidivism rate was less than 4% as opposed to the national average of 65%. So these people were actually going out and getting real jobs. And definitely last but not least, Judy Bonds. She's a coal miner's daughter and a coal miner's granddaughter. And if anybody would have been like, coal is king and will be forever, you would have think it had been somebody like Judy. But Judy had another idea, because she understood the economic consequences in addition to the health consequences of doing coal mining, because it wasn't like her daddy's coal mining, when they went down in the mines with those little hats and the little light on the front and went down and dug it up. That doesn't happen anymore. What they do right now is they literally take off the top of a mountain with explosives and a nice little nasty chemical mix that literally does this to one of the most ecologically important parts, of the Western Hemisphere. And those mountains never, ever, ever grow back. And this was done just for a few years worth of coal and about 24 jobs. And that's it. But Judy's idea was to create wind power on top of those hills when they discovered that there was a great opportunity, because they knew that if you kept the hills intact, kept those mountains up intact, that building turbines up on them would actually allow the kind of wind power that could generate power and jobs for people for a really, really long time. Not to mention it would be without the kind of negative consequences that you see like this. This is literally what people find when they turn on the tap, often when they're downstream from one of those mountaintop removal sites. Because this is what we're talking about. How do we make sure that we're doing this type of work, in our local communities as well? And unfortunately, earlier this year, when Judy and I met, actually a couple years ago, and when we met, we exchanged T-shirts, and so mine was Green the Ghetto, and the back of mine that she gave me says, "Save the endangered hillbilly." So, if a homegirl and a hillbilly can get it together enough to know that how we support each other and ourselves and the planet to really think about job creation in a way that's sustainable, I think anybody can. And sadly, Judy was another one of the lions that we lost this year. She was a product of her environment, and lived that mountain that I showed you was actually her ancestral homeland. 7 generations of her family were born and raised there, and just cut off that way. But I think the problems of living in an area like that with such environmental consequences took its toll on her, and she died of lung cancer earlier this year. But Jody's dream is going to happen. Why? Because her legacy was a business plan. And she's going to help, and whatever I can do to help make it happen, it'll happen. And so I think what all of these things, all the examples that I just gave you, it's really about how do you, it is about land use and how we use it and how we think about using it, now and in the future. And I've really been thinking about how we can use real estate development, as a platform for engagement. Socially, environmentally, and economically, that it is possible to do this in a way that inspires and it excites people to think about a future that they might not have thought about before. And it really sets a table that everyone feels as though they can be a part of. And this particular site, this is literally around the corner from the house that I grew up in, and actually now it's across the street from the house I grew up in. But it was a juvenile detention center called Spofford, Spofford Juvenile Detention Center, and it was possibly one of the most notorious in the country. It was opened back in the late 1950s, and since it was open, people have been trying to close it down because it was really corrupt, because there were all sorts of problems with it. My dad was actually a janitor there. Back in the 1970s, and I remember being a little kid and hearing him say things like, to my mom, that he wishes that our house was bigger because so many of the kids in that place are just going to be broken down by it. Like, they're not being rehabilitated. They're being broken. And it was known as a college for criminals. So prison reform advocates and child advocates actually got their way just earlier this year when the city decided to actually close Spofford and create allegedly a more a healthier way of supporting children and keeping them from moving down that path. And so I would walk by this place, and I've been walking by it ever since I could walk, literally. And and it was this big, huge thing that was on the horizon all the time. And I kept walking by it, and I kept looking at it, and I'm thinking, I would really like to do something with that site. It's about 4 acres big. And what I really am interested in doing is actually transforming it into a mixed income housing and mixed use economic development with manufacturing and retail and commercial. And I thought, that's really crazy. But why not? Because when I thought about it, really what I was responding to and where that came from was my thinking about just how there were really only 2 kinds of real estate development in poor communities. There's one that just anticipates and actually looks for gentrification and displacement. And there's the other kind that just assumes that poor communities are going to stay poor, and so there's a status quo thing that you do to sort of like create the kind of poverty level economics that is just maintained. So you'll see tons of liquor store applications or strip joint applications or check cashing joints or waste facilities and things of that nature. Those are not the kind of things that promote the kind of positive economic development that you find in other communities. You'll generally only see them in poor neighborhoods. That's how it works nationally. And I was like, I think we can do better than that on both sides. And I also was thinking about, what are some of these unintended consequences of integration? Like, I don't think anybody, who worked in the civil rights movement was really thinking about negative consequences associated with it. I mean, of course, people want freedom. They want to move wherever they want to be. But what happened was, we might have had racially segregated communities prior to integration, but we had economically diverse ones. So it was not uncommon for actually a doctor to live next door to a janitor, who lived next door to a teacher or a bus driver, and then the town wino kind of like lived between them all or stuff like that. And and to some extent, I actually saw a little bit of that because before the financial disinvestment, in the South Bronx when I was a little girl, before landlords were torching the buildings in order to collect insurance money, there was some economic diversity there. But the second those buildings started burning, the second we started seeing our neighborhood on the nightly news, and presidents were coming to talk about how bad it was and how great it was going to be once they got elected. People that had any kind of economic prowess were gone. And what did it leave? It left these very isolated pockets of poverty that were difficult for people to move out of. I mean, the only reason why we stayed was because my father bought his house back in the 1940s, and he couldn't sell it for anything. So those unintended consequences of integration. How can you use real estate not as a platform, for gentrification or more poverty, but how can you really use it to engage folks? And these are some things that we wanted to think about as we went forward. One was we had to look at what's going on, in our local community. This is it's an area map of the neighborhood on. Oh, here we go. So over on, okay, not working. So anyway, on one side, there's that big gray line that's the Bruckner Expressway that was built during the highway construction period, and it sort of separated the community from itself. On the red lines that you see on where there's a lot of them, that's the other side, not where the Spofford development is. And those are commercial strips. So that's basically where people can go shopping, where there's like lots of interaction between people. And all those little yellow dots represent population density. So you can see that the population density on both sides of the Bruckner, and you can actually walk across it at grade, but it's a little hairy to do so, but you can definitely do it. You can see there's a lot more on the other side than on the side that has Spofford. But but there's a possibility because we do have the density there. And we also, like I said, you can move across that line, across the Bruckner, in order to get to the transportation nodes and also to the shopping that's on the other side. But if given an opportunity, people could come over to us. It's just there's not that much for them to come to. But we want to change that. So we're looking at the site for Spofford as sort of a hinge, because it is right in the middle of this area. The yellow part represents where people live, and the other part is the industrial area, the former Little Pittsburgh, which we're hoping to turn into something even different from that right now. But again, it's right in the middle of all that, so it could be that little nexus, that beautiful little point where all great things could actually come out of it, and also again connecting to public transportation. And so we're looking at this site really as a catalyst for the kind of change, for the kind of engagement that we really believe can happen in our local community. Everything from, again, this is a mixed income housing development, because I'm happy and interested in supporting affordable housing, but I also think that it's really important to have a mix of incomes in a community, to make sure that there's aspirational, approaches, that people can see that there's something more in the world than just being poor. Because that's frankly what a lot of poor folks know, and they often have a tendency to not even leave their communities because they often don't feel as though there's any reason to leave or that they're welcome out there. But the second you start, creating opportunities for people to see, how they are also reflected in different people, including people of different ethnic and also economic levels, that's a really important thing. So we want this site to really be that, where you can actually have some of that as well. We know it's not going to be for everybody, but it will be for folks who actually see, the power of actually having an economically diverse community. And so building that all in. Manufacturing and education is excruciatingly important, because we really want to bring the idea and the reality of green jobs into the 21st century. It is about, how do you develop those industries and make sure that you've got the kind of place where that can happen. We're already in touch with folks who are looking at fabrication, like the kind of 21st century fabrication or fabrication laboratories that are to do even design, whether it's furniture design or clothing design, and really bringing it into the 21st century, as well as urban farming and things of that nature. And public space, which is when public space is quality public space, it is the great democratizer of urban planning, of any kind of planning, quite frankly, because you don't need money to do that, and everybody can enjoy it. And everybody benefits from being around in those type of situations. So we want to make sure that we've got that in spades, everything, from public plazas to gardens, whether they community and otherwise, and also commercial and retail. We want it to be possible for people to spend the bulk of their money in their local community. How amazing would that be? Like, it's shocking to me when I find out, literally I did my own little cost thing, and I realized, because there are no cafes, because we don't have a decent supermarket, because we don't have a shoe shop. I spend very little money, and I'm not alone. I spend very little money in my own community. I want to be supporting that, but first we've got to build those kind of opportunities for people to spend money. And so we want to phase this in right now, because remember, this site it's been this boogeyman on our landscape for the past more than 50, it's almost 60 years at this point. So we've got, and it's this huge, big old white building, and you knew nothing good ever happened there. So we literally want to start changing the perception of what it is as soon as possible. And so we're looking at some of the parking lots in that area and hoping to build a wholesale to the public farmers market, in there as well. Just starting hopefully really soon by next spring. And we're also interested in developing fabrication laboratories, on some of the buildings that actually do abut the street, not the high security places at all, but a fab lab is simply, it's just a, where you link personal computers with fabrication machines, so whether they're water jet cutters or, milling machines and things of that nature, so that you can build whatever your imagination, asks you to do. Like all the furniture in this particular mobile fab lab unit was actually built here. But we also are really interested in helping people to become, creators and inventors in their own right, and really look at that as an opportunity for themselves. When we had a fab lab, actually, a mobile fab lab in the Bronx, a couple of the young folks that actually worked there or actually went there realized that much of the quote-unquote waste that came through our community, in particular these pallet boxes, were just landfilled, a lot of them in Pennsylvania or incinerated here. And they realized that they were actually made of really nice hardwoods, and there was no reason why they should be landfilled or incinerated. And they realized that if they lashed them together, that they could actually make some pretty cool furniture out of it. So this was like a small furniture building operation that was very, very local, to the South Bronx as well, another satisfied customer. And we're also really interested in building on the things that are already happening in the local community too, like the South Bronx Greenway, which is literally being built as we speak right now, some of the public art projects that we're working on too, and also really working to activate places that really nothing has been going on there. But again, with the Greenway happening and really just bringing in little types of opportunities, whether it's a 24-hour, ambulance service to bring some type, or flea markets or farmers markets, or even some retail, ground floor retail, along streets that sort of circled the site itself. It would, like, I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little tiny picture up there. That street gets, it's because it was next to a jail. Not that many people went there, but it really did become known, I think throughout the 5 boroughs of New York City as a great place to go, for a trucker to pick up a prostitute, because it was so lonely. And so we want to activate places like that with a kind of street life, 24-hour street life, to make that kind of behavior less welcome there. But we don't want this particular development to be, just like this beautiful little, this oasis, where good things happen right there and the rest of the neighborhood sucks. No, that's not community development. That's nonsense. But that's what passes for community development a lot now. And it really boggles my mind. What we're really interested in doing is showing a proof of concept model of how you do the kind of mixed income and mixed economic development that actually really will show the rest of the community, and not just my community, mind you. I want to take this nationwide, to show that when you do that and you do it well and you're really smart about the mix of things that you bring in, that it actually helps raise the bar for the type of economic development that you see happening in other places around the whole community. So that's what those little orange dots kind of represent. That it represents the aspiration of development of the type of development that we know we're going to be seeing, once Spofford Market actually happens. And it really will activate the other places in the local community, because folks will see it'll be a destination. It'll also be the type of place that will allow folks to want to be there, want to move there, want to shop there. And it really is exactly that type of development that we want to see happening in every single step of the way. And I think that, speaking of another lost leader, this particular quote was taken from Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. And it was all about, and it was his response, to the letter that he received from a collection of white ministers who were kind of giving him grief for the integration thing. I mean, I think they were probably really worried about his well-being and a bunch of other things and wondering if he was moving too fast. But this was his approach. This was his response, which I thought was just brilliant in every single way. We don't have any time, to wait at all, because, I think when we stop and ask ourselves about what actually is sustainability? What exactly are we asking? And often the questions gets raised all the time, and it usually goes to things like, climate change, or, what do we do with all our plastics, and, the seventh generation going forward, and all that stuff is really, really good stuff, obviously. But in my opinion, so many of our bad environmental management decisions are actually based on our ability to disregard the environmental equality of some people. If we had located all of our energy, all of our waste, all of our mega agricultural operations in wealthy communities as quickly and as easily as we do in poor ones, we would have had a clean and green economy a really long time ago. But we didn't. But it's okay, never fear. I mean, really, this is a positive thing, and it really is positive. But the environment in a country like the U.S. really rests on decisions we make for the built environment and land use, like literally how we use our land. And those decisions, they have this ripple effect on absolutely everything, from food to water to air to obviously public health. I mean, all of it is all touched by it. And so part of how we think of the built environment and how our land is used has to be the economy. I mean, look, we're here in Pennsylvania, and I could not be here and not mention, the fact that there are farmers, who on land that their family has farmed for generations, who sell drilling rights to hydrofracking, gas drilling, because they need the money. I mean, because they need the money. I mean, it's going to destroy the water table all over the place. I mean, really. And so it's always about the economy, always. But also, I gotta give another shout out to Pittsburgh, because I understand that they're the only city in the entire country to ban hydrofracking. All right? Exactly. Now, I don't know exactly what that means, but in terms of a city actually doing that, but symbolically, that is so cool, and I'm so proud of you, and I wish my city and the rest of my state would do the same thing, but I'm not so sure about that. And also, I also understand that there's a whole bunch of young people here that are actually going to stage a really peaceful protest on Tuesday when Obama comes to talk about tar sands, and I believe also fracking. So please support the folks that are going out there, because this really is quite an issue, not just for the Northeast, but for all over the country. And there's no way Bill McKibben was going to let me be up on stage and not mention that. So there you go. So please, but be out there and give them help. Give them help nicely. Okay. But so since we know it's always been about the economy, and so for whatever reasons, we also know that the public education system in this country, has failed many generations of people at this point, leaving their futures pretty gosh darn bleak. I believe that the graduation rate, in my own community is actually below 50%. And that's not uncommon in a lot of places. But our green infrastructure and our land use decisions need to value the creation of accessible jobs, not as a cost, but as a huge benefit to the vitality of our nation. We are vital when we're working, not when we're leading the world in prison incarceration rates. But for you all, there really is a wealth of experience not being studied or used effectively. Look to the communities that you are located in for inspiration and for guidance. Developing economic models there will make your sustainability programs more effective, more attractive, to new students coming in, because that's going to be even more difficult as I think many more students are sort of start to see, the value of doing this. So you're competing with them as well, and also more cost effective, for you to operate too. And they also support the communities that you're located in as well, that your schools are located in. And I know that's not going to be easy to do. If it was, it would have been done already. But I want to be really clear with you, I'm not actually talking about volunteers, coming into a community and doing some work. What I'm talking about is actually creating the kind of economic models that actually put poor people to work. And that I think universities, especially those that are interested, in sustainability, can be a part of that and really bringing that to fruition, for the sake of your university and for the communities in which they're in. I mean, it really is about taking the whole town and gown syndrome and taking it and exposing it, but doing so constructively. And really creating and doing something awesome and great with it that, generations from now, people are going to be talking about what happened in the early 21st century and why it's totally so normal that sustainability is barely even a word anymore because people just know how to live. And that is your job. Those are your marching orders. And I really would be honored and happy to help you go there and help you make sure that you get there along with all of your communities, all of your students, and just so that we can actually say, we did this and we did it together. Why? Because we know that we can. This is not an impossible task for us. This is really a hopeful time. We know that we are in urgent times, but we also know that we've got everything, absolutely everything that we need to make this happen. I mean, if nothing else, your butts are in this seat on a lovely day, and it shows me that you're interested, and so am I. So I look forward to hearing more from you at any given point. Thank you so much. Great, and now we've got some time. Thank you very, very much. I so appreciate it. So we've got some time for some questions. So I can't see them, but there's microphones there, and I think somewhere over there. So can we turn these huge lights off so I can actually see people? That'd be good. Oh, and house lights up so we can see. There are fights for the mic. Okay.
I would like to know what you think are the most effective financing models that you are finding so that we can take folks who do have funds and would rather invest it in these kinds of projects and not be stuck with just socially and environmentally screened mutual funds or other choices we have today. You know what's been so beautiful since I sort of announced that I wanted to do this project, that was a huge question for me too. But obviously, to develop a more than 4-acre site, in a very, high rent real estate market in New York City, even the South Bronx is still pretty high. Those were questions that we had to ask. And the really nice thing about that is that there have been a lot of folks that are just looking, how do you develop public-private partnerships, because because our municipalities want to see social benefits happening, but there are also, folks who are, real investors who are seeing this, as a path in the future. So those particular, it is basically a more private financing, from the real estate development side, but also looking at different types of organizations, whether they're community development financing organizations that are expecting a much bigger return, but see this, as a different kind of return, and are happy to see that happen as well. But a lot of the private financing is going to be really helpful coming forward. Hi.
Hey, quick question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Sorry about that. As you develop places like this place in the Bronx and make it more desirable, how do you avoid displacing the original community?
We get them jobs. That this is a mixed income housing, but mixed income economic development. That's you have to do them both at the same time. I don't see any reason that's mostly why you don't see too many of those things happening right now. But there really is going to be a huge emphasis on education and making sure that we're getting people up to speed to do the type of jobs for the industries that we attract. And we fully expect there also to be an education factor on the part of us to support the rest of the local community, because, again, I'm not about perpetuating poverty in poor communities. I'm more interested in developing models that allow people to get jobs to move out of poverty.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you. No, sorry.
Good evening. Thank you so much. That was absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
Earlier today in the afternoon, Bill McKibben was talking about his book, The End of Nature, and he said he wrote it when he was 26 years old, and he mentioned that he had a very different model of change in his mind when he wrote that book. He thought people would read the book and fix themselves. What I'd like to know, if you could spend a few minutes talking about your model of change. How do you see change happening? And what can we do to facilitate it?
I see change really happening when people who have been shut out of actually being a part of any real discussions start seeing themselves as part of it. That really is why I focus on economic development, much, much more so than many of my peers, frankly, because it is all, for me, like, people who are economically disempowered act that way in every other part of their lives. And it means that they're not civically engaged. It means that there's often there are deficits in terms of how they even engage in their own lives, in their own health, in their children. And I've noticed that the second anybody starts to see that they have every right to demand for something, and just having and seeing how their self-interest is tied up to some economic development is a real great way to help make that happen. People will operate out of their own self-interest, and I have no problem trying to figure out ways to help people do that. But for me, it really is about how do you economically empower the disempowered. And we're going to go, so I'm sorry, I didn't realize there were two back there. I apologize. So, gentlemen, and then we'll go to the front.
Your mentioning of the problems created by waste management facilities in your neighborhood made me think about similar issues we've had in Connecticut. Have you seen any potential for improving air quality by requiring that any diesel-based trucks working in your area have special standards? So if you had a facility, for instance, that was being set up, you required all fleets of vehicles going there have a better standard than the standard diesel truck these days.
I'm sorry, what was the last line you said?
Whether you could actually require diesel vehicles operating in your neighborhood to achieve a better standard than the average required by the DOT and the EPA today? Yeah, I think that it's so interesting because there are waste management companies that are out there operating independently that see the value in doing that right now, because, I mean, whether they're sort of like, maybe they've got their ear, to the, I don't know what that phrase is, but anyway, or they're thinking that that there might be regulations coming down the pipe that we don't see like right away, but they're anticipating stuff like that, so they're already starting to do that. And there are like some really interesting examples actually in Washington State where folks are doing that. They're recycling absolutely everything. They're using biodiesel in their fleets. They're doing all this stuff like because they see the value in it, and they figured out for their economic model that it helps them. And so what I'm hoping is that we actually see more of that, again, from the economic model side, where it just makes good business sense for this to happen, and until, I don't know if it's going to be before, or I don't know when we're ever going to have a price on carbon, so I'm not counting on it anytime soon. But as far as like, what does it, when business owners start doing the cost benefit analysis, and clearly some have done it, and they realize that operating your business more sustainably actually saves them money. I find that incredibly encouraging, when I see that kind of things happening. But yeah, I would love to see some of that happening, especially in the communities, that have been
seriously jeopardized, as a result of not having any kinds of regulations that are supportive of the local community there. But in the meantime, I'm also just really emboldened and heartened by folks that are looking at it just from a cost benefits perspective, because I think that's also going to help them too. Okay. Okay, one. Okay, the last one. Ma'am.
They're telling me I can't talk.
Oh, you're the last. You're one more. You are.
One more?
You are.
Okay.
You're closing.
So I'm at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign.
Oh, I love you guys.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I really do. I mean, yeah. So you guys were the people I was talking about when I talked about the studies, those reams and volumes of research. And I'm sorry I didn't mention you by name, but yes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Well, we are a university town, but since I got involved in sustainability, I learned that 50% of the kids in our community are on the federal school lunch program. Mm-hmm. And in some schools, it's up to 80%.
Yeah.
And so have been talking with community members about how do you marry improving human well-being with the environment. And that's what I love about what you're doing. But I'd like to see it be a university community partnership.
Yes.
Because we do education,
yeah.
So we can help.
Right.
Do you know of good models for how people have done this, working to improve both quality of life, bring people out of poverty, create jobs, and also address the kinds of green issues?
I know some models, but I can certainly help you do some great ones.
Okay.
So seriously, take my information, because there is really, it's not, the stuff isn't rocket science. What it is seriously creating those partnerships and really doing, whether it's a cost-benefit analysis, particularly of your internal operations, but also what does it mean, to operate, as a community, as a member of a community, but be sort of disengaged from it. Like, what does that actually cost? And doing that, and I really am interested in helping universities actually make that happen.
Okay, I'll take you up on that. Thanks.
Cool, thank you. Cool. And I'm going to stick around, I guess, a little bit afterwards. So I guess the formal thing's over, but I'll be here. Yeah, sorry. Huh? Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your inspiration, both in your talk and in the work that you've been doing, and in the descriptions of all the things that are going on out there. This is truly a wonderful way to start the conference. It captures the complexity, the connections, and all the pieces that are important to create sustainable communities, to create hope, and to create opportunities for all. So thanks so much again, Majora, for your words. I have a couple of announcements that I need to make, and there's a couple of folks there's actually several folks I want you to be able to recognize, so when you run into them during the conference, you'll be able to say, hey, I want to talk to you about something. First, I want to ask my bosses, the board of directors of AASHE, to please stand. When you see them, tell them what a wonderful job they're doing and how great it is to have them run the organization. Thank you. And then the second group I'd like to ask to have stand are the staff of AASHE who make me look good. Okay, and now it is my pleasure to adjourn this session and direct you to the expo hall, where there is lots of food. And I know some of you are aching for that. I just want you to know that it's important for you to get there, and also to point out that all of the waste that you throw into the trash gets sorted. So don't stand there too long and worry about where you put it, because it's all going to get sorted right here in front of you sometimes on the back end, but it is all sorted out and then separated and sent to the best place possible. Be safe tonight, sleep well, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Good night.